Mayor, thank you for joining the show. And I think our phone line is connected okay, right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Perfect. So, Mayor, let me start with a couple of questions for you. I want to get your reaction to that new reporting indicating that the Trump administration has taken about $10 million from the FEMA budget, moved it over to ICE.
Well, you know, we have a saying in Puerto Rico, it's that you undress a saint to dress another one. And what he did is take money from a life-saving organization like FEMA, or at least that's what it should be, and put it in the hands of a life-caring and family-caring organization, because that's what certainly ICE has been doing in the, especially in the border at the United States, just tearing families apart. And it goes to tell you where President's priorities are. They're not in ensuring that families are together. They're not in ensuring that neglect does not end in the death of people, as it did in Puerto Rico with about 3,000 people dead. They are in ensuring that whatever he thinks is right just gets pushed through without any total disregard for people's lives and the impact that this will have on them. This is what happened in Irma and Maria. Actually, most of the policies got changed. Usually municipalities, like the mayor of Myrtle Beach was just speaking, would just write a letter saying, this is how much I have already expend on getting ready for the storm, and they usually give you a 50% reimbursement. That changed in Puerto Rico. It didn't happen for Maria. So that really curtailed the ability of many municipalities around Puerto Rico to perform life-saving activities.
Well, let me ask you two questions about that, because the president is talking about that storm, as you know, over the last 24 hours, the one that hit your area, San Juan and Puerto Rico. And the president tweeted this morning, specifically targeting you, Mayor, as I'm sure you've seen. He said, we got A+ for our recent hurricane work in Texas and Florida and did an unappreciated great job in Puerto Rico, even though an inaccessible island with very poor electricity and a totally incompetent mayor of San Juan. We are ready for the big one that is coming. What went through your mind when you saw the president tweet that?
Well, you know, oops, he did it again. Here he goes again. You know, he doesn't understand that this isn't about him and about his ego. This is about the inability of his administration that he directs to ensure that the appropriate help got to Puerto Rico in time. This is about his administration telling the Puerto Rico Power Authority that we cannot buy generators or light poles from countries outside of the U.S., even countries that the U.S. buys these services and materials from. So, you know, the president is all about political posturing. It's all about how good he's going to look. And I hope, for everybody's sake and for the sake of lives being saved in North and South Carolina, that FEMA has learned their lessons, that the president has learned their lessons, and that he goes to these states not to throw paper towels, not to point fingers at who is in a humanitarian crisis doing everything they can, but to do his job as commander-in-chief and ensure that help gets there. That is what we can hope. 3,000 people died because we didn't have electricity in time. And look, our own government have some responsibility.
So that's what I actually wanted to ask you about. And I don't want to interrupt, Mayor, but this brings me to the next question, because you brought up FEMA. You brought up some of the issues that FEMA had in Puerto Rico responding to that storm. Brock Long, the FEMA administrator, was out this morning, and because of the president's comments on Puerto Rico, he was defending the administration. And I want to play you what Brock Long had to say. Here's what he said.
Sure.
We faced a crumbling infrastructure. It was rotted and decayed, and FEMA can't help that. We have to deal with the deck of cards that we've been dealt.
Mayor, does he bring up a fair point? Do you bear some responsibility for the response to Maria?
Well, it is true. There was a crumbling infrastructure, but that has nothing to do with not providing the number of tarps that needed to be provided. That has nothing to do with, look, 97% of the people that asked for funeral relief aid in Puerto Rico. FEMA has denied them, even though they have admitted, and Brooke Long himself has admitted in congressional hearings, that it took them longer, that they had problems getting off the ground. Where if you're in the emergency management system and it takes you time to get off the ground, you're admitting to your own negligence. Now, did we do a lot of damage before in terms of a problem? It's like telling somebody that is in a building, that is an old building, that catches fire, that it's their fault because they didn't run fast enough. The truth of the matter is that independent reports from George Washington University, from Harvard University, have said that the majority of the people died from the botched effort. And I have to say, unfortunately, that the majority of the Puerto Rican political class decided to be silent when we all knew that we were dying and that the bureaucracy and inefficiency of the federal government, aided by the neglect, the structured neglect, that being a colony of the United States or a territory of the United States provides, allowed President Trump to look the other way. He has not tweeted once to say he's sorry about the deaths of Puerto Rico, but he has time to tweet at little old me.
Mayor of San Juan, Carmen Yulin Cruz, joining us on the show this morning. Mayor, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining the program to talk about the president's tweets and the response from the...
Beaming from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The title of our episode, 3,000 Dead in Puerto Rico. The story of what happened in Puerto Rico as cited by the people of Puerto Rico, in particular the Mayor Carmen Yulin Cruz, the mayor of San Juan, Puerto Rico. We came in with her most recent installment. She did it with with NBC News. What actually happened there? The president has tweeted various things. One thing needs to be understood about the tweets of DJ Trump. Most of them are what's called flippables in the language of political consultants. What you do is, when you are accused of something, negligence, etc., and it was negligence on your part, you just flip it. He called the mayor of San Juan incompetent. How does he know the mayor of San Juan is incompetent? This was a FEMA operation from day one. And then the political lackey Long, they panned to him a little audio from old Long. He's the head of FEMA. By basically saying the system in Puerto Rico was out of date. Well, the question has to be posed. Puerto Rico in itself is a part of the U.S., and why was the electrical grid out of date in Puerto Rico? It's because of inaction by the Congress. And, of course, the political class, as Mayor Yulin Cruz says, is politically impotent in this affair, and that adds insult to injury. But we are now getting reports as, first of all, the Trump administration put down, and the lackeys in Puerto Rico, the number of people that actually died. Now we know there are 3,000. You'll hear some surveys here from the Kaiser people, and we will approach this situation as we can. And we have a clip here. We'll play some of it from Mayor Yulin Cruz in 2017 that talking about the story of Puerto Rico. This is on the 29th of September 2017. We'll come back to this, and you'll get to hear a part of this also. But we'll go now to the big data part of this particular broadcast as we move to find the big data part. This is was placed in the Washington Post, and we were gathering the information from the Washington Post. Incidentally, on the Boston Red Network, we'll have a special on political polling, in addition to what we normally do here with Friday Jobber and the week that was, and also the other programs that we bring forward. You just look here. This is the Washington Post story. It's a very long story. Residency of Faye at all levels of government. This is dated the 12th of September from Scott Clement, is one of the principal, and Emily Guskin. Here, and we'll append this, Puerto Ricans sharply debate Trump, along with for the federal and local government for the last year response to Hurricane Maria, a devastating storm that created an enduring humanitarian crisis. Now, this is a poll from the Washington Post and the Kaiser Family Foundation. A year after Maria hit Puerto Rico, people say they are struggling with basic necessities. A full 83% report either major damage to their homes, losing power for more than 3 months, that's 90 days, employment setbacks or worsening health problems, and other effects of the storm. Power is spotty. Many are leery of drinking the water, sort of like in Flint, Michigan. Roads are damaged, dangerous, and difficult to navigate, like the surface of the moon, according to one resident. We live day by day. We are living with the hope that things will get better, but they are not. That is from Mr. Antonio Rodriguez Zayaya. He is a 55-year-old diabetic educator. He thinks the federal government's response was disorganized and gave low marks to DJ Trump. Here's some of the results here. Puerto Ricans give negative rating to DJ Trump, federal government and local government, for Hurricane Maria's response. How do you rate the job each has done in response? DJ Trump, only 15% found an excellent. A full poor 80% there. The Puerto Rican government 25% excellent, very good, fair, poor, roughly about 34%. Governor Ricardo, he's the local lackey in charge there, 31% excellent, good, fair, poor. The poor 31% there. The federal excellent, very good government response, 39% there, and poor 22%. Your municipal government, wherever that might be, 41% said the municipal government. Now, a lot of municipal governments, not just San Juan. Trump has long maintained his administration's recovery effort in Puerto Rico was appropriate and effective, saying the federal government did a fantastic job. He reiterated that point on Tuesday in remarks in the Oval Office responding to a hurricane in the U.S. territory. Incredible. On Wednesday morning, taunting the government's preparation for a landfall of Hurricane Florence. Now, that will, along the eastern coast, his administration did an unappreciative job in Puerto Rico. It's amazing. He really believes that Zaya said of Trump. Puerto Ricans say the lackluster response to the hurricane, which ravaged the island in September of 2017, was due to a failure of government at all levels. 80% of Puerto Ricans rate Trump's response negatively there, as you heard in the survey. 7 in 10 residents give negative marks to the Puerto Rican government efforts, while 2/3 criticize the response of Governor Ricardo Rosero. Similar majorities are critical of the response from both the federal and municipal authorities. Now, the president has to remember that we are Puerto Ricans. If you like it or not, we are part of the U.S. That is from Raymond Pacino, who lives in Ponce City. That's the southwest coast of the island. You see the response they got in Miami and in New Orleans. a wide-range impact of Maria on Puerto Ricans, percentage of Puerto Rican residents whom experienced any kind of following Maria. Due to Maria, 83% there had power outage of more than 3 months, 90 days. 44% experienced negative incomes and employment effects, 42%. Houses were destroyed, 26%. Had a new or worsened health condition, 23% there. That's drinking water from a natural source, 21%. Vehicle was damaged, 20%. Related mental health problems, 9%. Now, the PISA survey conducted face-to-face amongst 1,500 randomly selected Puerto Ricans in July and August. It's the first to gauge experiences during the landfall of Maria. 2/3 of the storm caused major and minor damages to their home. Most of them say the structures had not been restored to original condition. 93% said the area needs more resources to repair roads and highways. More than 4 in 10 Puerto Ricans say their power was not restored until January or later, 4 months after the storm. Nearly all the residents now have access to working power grid. Outages are common. Maria hit 24%. Hit 24% of the household borrowed money from relatives or family. 26% had problems paying for food. 17% fell behind in payments of rent and mortgage. A study published by George Washington University, one of the major studies, Mayor Yaslin Cruz talked about it. There was a spike in mortality in Puerto Rico in the 6 months after the storm. An estimated 2,975 excess deaths contributed to the hurricane and its aftermath. Most of the deaths occurred more than a month after the storm. That's a very interesting finding there. 1 in 5 residents say a close friend or family member died from multiple injuries caused by the storm because they were unable to get sufficient water, food, and medical care in the months after. The poll also confirmed anecdotal evidence of people fleeing Puerto Rico after the storm, with 68% of the island's residents saying they know a close friend or family member who had moved away from the island. A lot of them moved to Florida. Most Puerto Ricans were not surprised by Maria's arrival, with nearly 3/4 of residents saying they got enough warning about the severity of the storm, which in itself is historic. The storm's passed through the middle of the island. Exacted extraordinary damage from coast to coast. About 100% of the residents lost power thereafter. That's according to the post-Kaiser study. About a quarter of the residents said power loss from Maria affected their ability to store medications and use medical devices. 17% said they or a member of their family needed mental health services, no doubt. The storm also made it extremely difficult for many on the island to access drinking water. I guess DJ Trump didn't throw bottled water at people. He threw paper towels. Getting around the island is far more difficult than before the storm. So in other words, the roads had not been restored to date there. And they had insult to injury. DJ Trump has diverted funds from FEMA, a very important government agency, to ICE. Now, this was a whole question in what happened in New Orleans, Louisiana, with the infamous hurricane that hit New Orleans. A big question there was there supposed to be a medical response or a law enforcement response? Well, what happened down there, these various redneck politicians types got a law enforcement response. Not only that, they invited coppers from various jurisdictions and the cities under those jurisdictions, as far as Detroit, etc., drove their cruises to Detroit, to New Orleans, the Big Easy. Now, the problem there obviously was that they knew nothing of New Orleans. So they had a bunch of guns there, but not the types of health care that they needed. FEMA, under this Brownie character, was totally disorganized. Thousands of people were in the New Orleans Dome, the football stadium, and then there was at least an orderly evacuation plan to Houston, Texas, as many of those residents are still there. The mayor at the time in Houston was a humanitarian, and Houston came to their aid. But the people that died needlessly there was because they were not prepared. The levees had been suspect for many, many years, and the proper money was not there. The Army Corps did not do their job that they should have done there. And that's where the whole situation came in. And also, the people in New Orleans, and most of them that were dead, injured, or displaced, were African Americans, or people of color. And it's the same thing is happening in Puerto Rico. Let's just face it, this is a racist operation. It's racist to the core. It's sort of the same as the ICE, the so-called ICE situation. It is targeted towards brown and black residents, period. People of color. That's the whole so-called law enforcement that is there. And we look back to when this nation, 1776, became a country, had a constitution. 20 years after that, slavery was banned. There were no new slaves introduced into the U.S. There were in places like Brasilia and in the Caribbean. In fact, in Brazil, they continued to come for roughly a little over 20 years after the end of the Civil War in America. A little commentator there. And he goes on to say this is opposed to a majority of Puerto Ricans are concerned about the future percentage of Puerto Rican residents who say they are very worried about another hurricane will cause similar or worse. 91%. They are preparing for the hurricane. 81%. Puerto Ricans who are not prepared for the futures. Hurricane, 67%. The federal government not prepared for the future, 54%. The territory considering, those that are seriously considering moving to Puerto Rico, 27% there. Now, this is the hurricane study, the after deaths here. At the aftermath caused a spike in deaths, nearly 3,000 there. This is from the Washington Post. Was devastated Puerto Rico, no doubt about that. And we are now getting actual results. A new study requested by the government of Puerto Rico examined unusually long periods of time following a storm, 6 months, in an attempt to detect the lingering indirect effects on mortality. The George Washington University report has its limitations, does not specify how people died. It's statistical based on death records and expected mortality. We have come up with hundreds of different hypotheses. That is from Lynn Goldman, the dean of the Milken Institute of Public Health. She offers examples of the lack of of electricity, which prevented the use of some medical devices. And new estimates from Maria's death toll is significantly higher than the death toll attributed to Hurricane Katrina. That was 1,833 according to National Hurricane Center. Many residents were outraged by the government's intransigence in amending the official death toll. A Harvard University study estimated that in the spring that the total was 8,000, the midpoint being 4,645. And this is where it was literally all over the place in the estimates going on there. And then there's some different things coming about here, but basically the study failure response hindered the federal Puerto Rican response, so forth and so on here. The problem with power and the Harvard University study. We'll append all these on the report so you will be able to peruse them. See if we can find the actual study. We'll have to look this up. We usually like to go to the source studies, and we can find out exactly what occurred. And we're going to have to look for the source studies afterwards here, and where we can get the actual studies themselves out. Here, we had at one time, we have somewhere on the desk or on the workstation, the actual, not the Harvard study, but the study by George Washington University. We'll get that for you. But let's go back now to the mayor of San Juan, Puerto Rico, Ms. Yadlin Cruz. Here we go.
All right, that was San Juan, Puerto Rico's mayor, just weeks after Hurricane Maria. She was reacting to a Trump administration official who said recovery from the storm was a good news story because of the limited number of deaths. Well, now, almost a year later, the revised death toll finds nearly 3,000 people were killed by the storm, not 64 people. So the new number is 46 times higher than the government's previous estimate. And joining us now is San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz. Mayor, thank you so much for being here with us. How did the government get the official number so wrong from 64, which is what they said, to we now know 3,000?
Well, sometimes people don't want to handle the truth. When we were walking around Puerto Rico, we were walking around San Juan, we could see the devastation. And we knew that there were people dependent on life support systems, on insulin, chemotherapy, dialysis, that because they had no power, they weren't able to receive that. So today is a very sad day and a very shameful day, because those that did not want to see the truth that I'm hearing today, this is ridiculous. People from the administration, the Puerto Rican government, saying, well, nobody is ever very prepared for a Hurricane 5. Well, that may be true. But the one thing that we were prepared for was to tell the truth. And just as I saw it, just as I knew that this wasn't a good news story, that people were dying and that the bureaucracy and inefficiency were killing us, everybody should have had the presence of mind to just go out and tell the truth. But they didn't want to tell the truth because they wanted to sing to the tune of Donald Trump and the spin of the good news story. Well, now it's proven. This is a people died story. This is not a number. It's 2,975 people, and they're still calling it an estimate. 2,975 people that will never see the light of day, and many of them died because of neglect. Neglect that was done by the Trump administration and that was silently approved by most of the political class in Puerto Rico.
And so, Mayor, who do you hold responsible?
Well, you know, everybody is responsible. But there were people in power that had the opportunity to request more aid, to request the aid when it was reasonable, to request the aid when it was needed, to tell the truth, and they didn't tell the truth. And the governor of Puerto Rico sat there beside the president when he said, oh, 16? You ought to be commended. That's not a real disaster. Katrina is a real disaster. Well, Katrina was a real disaster. And now we have more deaths than Katrina. And what comes out of the White House yesterday is simply we are very proud and we are of what we did and we are very committed.
So the White House, the president says he's proud of how he handled Hurricane Maria. He says, actually, Sarah Sanders said this yesterday. The president remains proud of all of the work the federal family undertook to help our fellow citizens in Puerto Rico. Should President Trump be proud?
Shame on President Trump. Shame on President Trump for not even once, not even yesterday, just saying, look, I grieve with the people of Puerto Rico. Shame on him. First of all, he doesn't even take a time of the day to say, look, I'm sorry that you people are grieving. I'm sorry that your people died. And secondly, what is there to be proud of? 2,975 dead? Is that what he's proud of? Is he proud of that maybe this is over now and he thinks it's going to go away? Well, it's not going to go away. We're going to remember this forever. This will be a stain in his presidency for as long as he lives. Because rather than coming here to support us, he came here to throw paper towels at us. And we will never forget, and we will always remember.
The mayor, the governor, the Puerto Rico governor, has admitted, he says, I agree, I have made mistakes. I agree in hindsight that I could have done things differently. What do you want to see him do? Can he stay as governor?
You know, democracy gives him a 4-year term. But what I would like to see him do is fire the people that were in charge of that part. Yesterday, he stood there with Secretary Pesquera. And one of the things that the report states is that there was too much power given to one person to control the emergency management units. That was Hector Pesquera. When back in October, I said, look, we're dying here. There must be more than 1,000 people dead using the same numbers that the government of Puerto Rico was giving us. I was called by that man, Hector Pesquera, a charlatan, irresponsible, show me the proof and then you can talk. But now he's part of the commission that's going to look into this more deeper and is also going to make recommendations. Well, you know, there are things that municipalities are doing that we don't need any report to tell us. One of the things that we're doing in San Juan is we are making small centers called Centers for Transformation, Community Transformation, where people will have solar charging capabilities for their cell phones, where they will be able to go and keep their insulin because it's refrigerated, where they can take care of their asthma because a lot of people died of that, asthma and not having the appropriate insulin. Well, they can get first aid, they're taking CPR classes and so forth. So we're making sure that we push that first level of response in the first 72 hours to the communities and that they are empowered to do that. And so now, you know, we're going to have this commission that should move things along.
Yeah, but what I want to ask you, Mayor, is that given all of that, given what you've seen, given the woefully inadequate response, as we now know, because the death toll for Maria is higher than Katrina, are you ready for hurricane season? Are you ready for the next one?
No, we're not. We're not. First of all, people are traumatized. A couple of weeks ago, Hurricane Beryl was set not even to hit Puerto Rico, and people were traumatized by this. 2 days ago, there was flooding in San Juan just from regular rains. Just 2 days ago. Flooding in different areas of San Juan. We still have thousands of roofs or blue roofs that are not safe for people. If they have, even when Hurricane Beryl, the governor was saying, if you have a blue roof or if you have a tarp, please go to a shelter. Don't stay in your house. It's not safe. Our grid is very inefficient still. You can lose your power a couple of times a week. And most of the hospitals still don't have any generators. In San Juan, our hospital now has 2 generators and a 10,000 gallon of diesel. So, you know, we have done as much as we can do to prepare, but we're not ready.
Well, Mayor Carmen Julian Cruz, we appreciate you coming on and sounding the alarm of what you see, and we certainly hear your anger about what happened during Hurricane Maria. Thank you very much, and obviously we will be checking back in with the island as we...
This is the reason we at WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network decided we would do this as a public service and to get as much information out here as is possible at this junction. We will continue to look back at this. We've done several programs on Puerto Rico, and Mayor Yellen Cruz She is one of the progressive people there in Puerto Rico. But this commission they are setting up be similar to the Warren Commission that said nothing and didn't talk very loudly. And this is in 2018, is not something to be tolerated. We would assume that people that have the mic, Dan Rather, for instance, Bernie Sanders, etc., would and Bernie Sanders has done this, and hopefully he will go to Puerto Rico before it's too late to just spotlight this and other people that have assisted the Puerto Ricans, and also Puerto Ricans that are have moved to Florida. They are eligible to vote, and in a situation they will turn out and vote in the midterm elections and vote against those that are responsible for these hideous mistakes that have put them in harm's way and in Florida. We've had some problems down there with motivation, but this should be motivation enough to get them motivated. We need to take a quick station break here, and we'll do the sports. We return from the Jerry Pippin press box. Here we have the baseball scores. With the exception of the Rangers and Angels, they're playing in California. It's the bottom of the seventh, according to this, and the score is 7-1 Angels. The Dodgers and Reds played earlier. It was 8-1 Dodgers over the Reds in Cincy. The Astros and Tigers in Detroit, 4-5 was the score, Astros. Cleveland and the Rays in Florida, Rays 3-1. The Pirates and Cardinals in St. Louis, Pirates 4-3. Atlanta and the Giants in San Francisco, 2-1 Atlanta over San Francisco. The Marlins and Mets in New York, that was a rain-delayed game there, and they were trying to, do some making up there. Nonetheless, the Marlins were shut out 13-1. The line score was the Mets had 14 hits and 1 error, and the Marlins had 5 hits, 2 errors. The Padres and Mariners in Seattle, the score there was 5-4 Padres. Effectively, Seattle's chances of getting in the playoffs are getting dimmer by the minute. That was according to Susan Walden, the Yankees broadcaster, earlier tonight. Anyway, nonetheless, the Nationals and Phillies in D.C. The Nationals are 5-1 over the Phillies. Phillies have been in a skid. Not sure what's going on there. The Athletics and Orioles in Camden Yard. Orioles was shut out. They're going in the wrong direction. Athletics 10-0. The Blue Jays and Sox in Fenway Park, 1-0 Sox over the Blue Jays. The Brewers and Cubs in Wrigley Field. This is an unfortunate situation here. It was Brewers 5-1. The Brewers had 11 hits and 1 error, and the Cubbies 6 hits and 2 errors. Oh well. The Yankees and Twins in Minnesota. Twins 3-1. There was a no-hitter there for the Twins pitcher. Or there is he? Anyway, he was the winner, and the save went to Heidenberger. Anyway, and in 12, the White Sox were in Kansas City. Sox 4-2 in that particular contest. They both had 7 hits, no errors. The Diamondbacks and Rockies in Denver. It was Rockies 5-4. That's still a race out in the West. And the Marlins and Mets finally just rained out, postponed there. That does it for them. This will also do it for us, our broadcast. 3,000 dead in Puerto Rico. We remember that as the hurricane. And let me just see if I can get the latest here on the Hurricane Florence that is approaching the Carolinas. It has been weakened. This is according to the Reuters service. Hurricane Florence grows in size. despite its weakening winds on Wednesday as it crept closer to the East Coast. Mobilization there in the Carolinas and into Georgia to counter threats of the situation there. The center of Florence no longer classified as a major hurricane, but still posing a grave threat to life and property. Is expected to hit North Carolina's southern coast on Friday, then drift southward along the shoreline before moving inland on Saturday. That is from the Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. The storm is at 110 miles per hour. That's 175 kilometers per hour, down from a peak of 140 miles per hour, downgraded to a Category 3, then a Category 2. So basically its winds there, the stretch of the eastern seaboard remains vulnerable to the hurricane from North Georgia through the Carolinas into Virginia. And the North Carolina governor said they are prepared. Now, it could drop 20 to 30 inches of rain. That is 51 to 76 centimeters of rain, with up to 40 inches of that in North Carolina. Tens of homes and businesses could be flooded in North Carolina alone. The Governor Cooper is on that. In Georgia, Governor Dill is on that. They have 152 counties in there. And declarations were made early in North and South Carolina, Virginia, in Maryland, and even the District of Columbia. I suppose it could go that far up there. It is also, according to Reuters, heaping desperation on rural U.S. towns ravaged by the Hurricane Maria in 2000. Well, wait a minute. No, that's 2016. It wasn't Maria then. But, yeah. This is in Raleigh and various other locations around there. Fair Bluff, I'm not sure where any of these places are, but this was 2 years ago. Lamberton, etc. This is in North Carolina. So this storm is on the move, no doubt about that. And if you are staying safe, we got from Governor in West Virginia. They are also preparing in West Virginia. We get that bulletin up here. We get it from him all the time, and we'll see if we can get him up here. There's no reason of getting news releases and not using Governor Justice there from his office. Provides update on the state of preparedness for Hurricane Florence. Following an operational briefing earlier today, Governor Justice is providing follow-up information as an update on the preparedness there. We mobilized multiple state agencies to prepare for the impact of West Virginia Hurricane Florence. And we want to ensure that we are ready to respond to our citizens as quickly as possible. So they have 50 people from their guard out there, and dispatched other soldiers to interagency, etc. Guard coordinating and deploy National Guard coordination centers in South North Carolina and Virginia. This is some of their joint task force people there. So they are preparing in a way that they weren't able to prepare in Puerto Rico, obviously. They have the 167th Airlift Wing in Martinsburg, some guard people there, communication checks, etc. County liaison officers out there activated new emergency operations center today. That's some of the things they've done. And the E-Team platform activated. That's a web-based platform. None of that they had in Puerto Rico. Hosting a special national web service briefings for county and local emergency managers at 2 p.m. Daily. and coordinate with FEMA and the West Virginia State Police is in the action here. We're just looking the West Virginia Intelligence and Fusion Center. Personnel have received updates from partners regarding their preparedness efforts for the hurricane and passing along to state emergency centers. This is fairly detailed that Governor Justice is doing here. And I think for this report, it's a good idea to have it. The role of the West Virginia Department of Health and Human Resources Center for Threat Preparedness, directed under the State Health Department Bureau of Public Health Facilities, Advanced Planning, etc. So they're involved also in this situation. The Environmental Department of Environmental Protection, they obviously need that in West Virginia. Department of Transportation. You can see they have a long list of things that they're actually doing, and we're appreciative of Governor Justice and his update here. This will do it for us. Again, the title of our episode, 300 Dead in Puerto Rico. And hopefully we'll not have as many. We just got an update here. The Minneapolis storm win the 2008 WNBA championship. The Storm went to Washington, D.C. with a 2-1 lead, so they won the championship. That is the WNBA, the women's version there, closing out of their season, and we're glad to have that close out their belated sports there, but we do cover a lot of different sports here, so we got that in. Good day.